Welcome to Code Jogging. In this video, we are going to look at the use of modifiers in Compose UI. A modifier allows us to customize or decorate a component in Compose UI. For example, a modifier can help us to specify a width and then the height for a component or a background color for a component. Modifier can be used on any component. For example, text component, layer grouped component, that's columns and then rows, and we'll be looking at some of the components that we've not handled yet. For us to use the Compose UI, we need to call the parameter or a property called modifier in our component. So let's use text component and then apply the modifier to it. So we call our text, then we type welcome to Code Jogging. Welcome to Code Jogging. Okay. So let's run. And from our previous video, we used typography. So though we've not add any style to this text field, but default it will use the default typography that we specified. So that's the reason why the text has become a little bigger. Now let's add a modifier to it. We can add a modifier to it by calling the modifier parameter, then we call the modifier class dot. We wait for a little second and the IntelliSense will pop up, giving you the functions or the attributes you can use to customize your component. First, you have the width, you have the height, you have the fill max height and then fill max width, you have the background color, you have the fill max size, padding, and then you have a lot of functions that you can use to customize your components. So for example, we can decide to give our background color red. Let's run it and then see the output. Okay, now we've changed our text component background color to red. For us to add another modifier to it, we don't need to add or bring a semicolon. We rather have to add a full stop, and it's not necessary for it to be on the straight line or on the same line. You can break it down. So modifier, you can bring this one down. Okay, let's break this one down so that it will be easy for us to read through it. Let's give it a width, let's say 30 dp, and then let's run it. We are giving it a fixed width, that's 30 dp. Let's see what happened. Yes, that's the result we had. And we can also give it a fixed height, let's say 70 dp, so that we don't want it to be tall like this. Okay, so with the help of the modifier, we were able to specify the height and then the width for this text component. Now we don't want to give a fixed width and then height. We just want to make our component responsive so that it can adapt to any screen. So for us to achieve that, we don't need to use the width and then the height, but we can use fill max width and then fill max height. With the fill max width, it means that you are taking the whole width of the screen. That's from the start of the screen to the end of the screen. Let me show you how it is. So fill max width, we are expecting to see the red background starting from the beginning of the screen and then it stretches to the end of the screen. So, and it doesn't accept DP. You can make it empty. Okay, so let me run it again. Okay, now you can see that it has filled the width of the screen horizontally. Okay, what if you want to fill the height of the screen vertically? So we can do the same thing by specifying width height. So fill max height, and then there we go. Now you can see that our text component has filled the whole screen. Okay, if you want to use both fill max width and then fill max height, there's a shortest way of doing that. We don't need to call these two codes before we can apply this kind of modifier to our component. You can rather call one, that's fill max size. It means that we are filling both the width and then the height of our screen. Yes, you can now see that we've achieved the same goal. When we used, let me go back, these two codes, you can achieve the same goal by using this one. Okay, so let's assume that we don't want it to fill our entire screen. Okay, so when we want it to fill a certain part of our screen, then we can then specify the kind of the spaces we want to leave it behind by using a float here, less 7. So it means that you should leave a space. Yes, now you can see that we've left a space here, and then it has given us a nice layout. And let me explain this one a little bit. The reason why we decided to use the floating 0.7 here, default it accepts 1, that's 1 float. Height from the beginning to the end is the total of 1 float, and then the width from the beginning to the end is the total of 1 float. So if you want to take part of the screen off from your UI or from your component, like how we've done it here, like the red is taking a little or a bigger part of the screen, then you have to specify using a float value or a floating value here that starts from 0.0 to 1.0. okay, so the range is like a percentage. Okay, so now we can assume that if we are using this one, that we are taking 70% of the screen width and then 70% of the screen height. That's the reason why we were able to achieve this, though the space at the horizontal side is not the same as the space at the vertical side. Yes, because of the screen. Okay, so this is how we can use our modifier to also make our component responsive. So if you rotate the screen, it will still give you a responsive width and then height. Okay, so let me use the fill width. Okay, when you run it, we are still going to achieve the same thing. Instead of it to stretch from the beginning to the end, it will still leave the 30% space at the end of our component. Okay, so now let me take this one off and then run the code again. Okay, now we've made our width fill max width, so it means that we've taken the whole screen width. Now we want to add a space between the text and then the container. That's the component with the background color red. Now we can see that the W is attached to the beginning of the screen, which you don't want it to be like that. Then we can then use padding, and the padding, we have several ways of applying it, like how we did for the width and then the height. If you want to apply the padding to the top only, then we call top, let's give it 10, that's 10 dp. Okay, now you can see that we've added a space between the beginning of the component and the beginning of the text inside the component. That's the reason why the text has moved down a little bit. That's the use of the padding top. Okay, and now if you want to add a button to, or if you want to add a space at the below of the text, then we can add button D. Okay, let's run our code. Okay, so now we are having a space at the bottom of the text. So let's say we want to move, or we want to provide a space between the W and the beginning of the component. Then you can use start. Okay. Yes, now we've provided a space between our W, that's the beginning of the text, and then the beginning of the component. So we can do the same thing for the end here, but because the text doesn't stretch to the end, we won't see it. So let me add some text to it. Let me add a text that will stretch to the end. Okay, let me add another one to it. Just adding any text to it so that we can see the space at the end of the text using the other pattern. Okay, it has moved to the next line, so let me add O to it, and then let's see if it will still get to the end. Now we are making it responsive. Default is a responsive, so okay, so now let's add end. Then let's specify 10. So now let's run the code. Okay, so now we've been able to add a space at the beginning, at the end, on top, and then at the bottom of our text. Now you can see that we are having the same value here. I'm not saying that you should always use the same value. You can change it. You can make the start 2, the end 10, the top 20, the bottom 100, you can change it to any value that you want. But in case you are going to have the same value for the top and then the bottom, then you don't need to do it one by one. You can then use vertical, then you make it 10, okay, 10 dp. And as soon as you use the vertical, you can't use the start and then the end. Then if you want to use the start and the end, you have to use the horizontal. That you have in mind that both the beginning and then the end will have the same value. You have to use the horizontal, and if you know that both the top and the bottom will have the same value, then you use the vertical. So 10 dp, then let's run it. We are supposed to achieve the same thing. Okay, now you can see that we've achieved the same thing. So now we've realized that both the horizontal and then the vertical, they have the same value. If you have it in mind that both left and right, top and bottom will have the same value, then there's no need for you to use horizontal and then vertical. Then we can use all. Then we specify 10. It means that we are applying this value to all of the positions. That's the beginning, that's the start, end, top, and then bottom. So let's run. Here we go. Now, with the little practice we've done so far, we can see that we always get the same result. Yes, that's the use of the padding and modifier to customize our components. We have a lot of things that we can use, a lot of functions that we can use in modifiers, but because we are using a test component, I think it's good for us to stick to these three. And as we continue, or as we progress to a new component, we will apply a different set of modifiers to it, and then we will see how modifiers work. Now, let's look at, let me delete this one, and then let's add one to it. Yes, let me explain this one, and then let's say you are not sure about the height of your component, but you want it to end at a specific height. Then you can say that you can give a range, that is the minimum height and then the maximum height. And when you put the cursor on it, it tells you that specify the minimum and then the maximum. That you are giving a range that if there's nothing inside, or maybe the data inside it doesn't reach this height, just set the height to this value. So let's say if there's nothing inside, or the data inside it is not doesn't reach the height, then you should give it the minimum, but the data height shouldn't exceed, let's say, 700 dp. Okay, so now let's run the code and see. So now we're given a specific range from 50 to 70. So our height should fall within the range. Okay, so let's run it and see the output. Yes, now you see that it has increased our height a little bit, because the height doesn't the height is not the same as 50 pixels. And from our code, we are saying that if the height is not, or the height is less than 50 pixels or 50 dp, then set the height to 50. And if the height is more than 70 dp, then set the height to 70. You shouldn't go beyond 70. The same thing applies to the use of width in the same thing. So let's run it and see. Let me remove this one, and then let's run it and see. Let me run it again, and then so that we can see the output. Okay, so whilst we are waiting for it, okay, now it's done. So let's see the output here. Yes, now we can see that because we specified that the max width should be 70, so it didn't go beyond 70 dp. Yes, so that's how we can also give a range of a specific width and then a range of your height in your code. In case you have any comments or any suggestions or how you can help us to improve on our videos, you can reach us through the mail, or if you have any questions about the lesson we've learned so far, you can leave it at the comment section. Thank you for watching this video. See you in our next video. Bye bye.